Okay, everybody, and congratulations for finishing the intro chapter. And in there, we talked about the workflow and how the things are going to be created in this tutorial. Now, let's go over some references to see the direction and where we're going. So, this is the main reference that we have. Of course, I have three more variations from the same thing, and I liked something about every design. You see now from this one, I really like this cut in here. I like this cut in here as well. I like the button placement in this one. I like the overall design and how the things have been separated into three different pieces. The front part, which is actually the main UI, the middle part, which is holding the things together, and the back part, which is this one. And this is the reference that we're going for the back part. So from every design, I have separated some things and we're going to mix things together. We're not going to go totally like this one. We're not going to go totally like this one. We're going to go something in between. And the thing that we're going to go for is this radio, and we're going to go for this one as well, because I believe this one has some more advanced set of challenges. For example, how to deal with adding details on curved surfaces like this one, how to model some cushions, how to maybe simulate some cloth and things like that. Of course, we have some images in here as well, because something that I have, this one is for the UI of the radio. On this one, in this area that we have the player, we might place this image there. And then we have this sound controller device in here in the center. I might do this design in there. Of course, we're not going to model that, but I can of course go and model that. I'm going to provide the image for you. The techniques are going to be the same if you're going to model this one. And then we got this one, and I decided that I might create something like this LED screen, and we might make it something of a rectangular shape to hold this one. And we're going to make it emissive inside Painter so that it glows light as well. So now let's go see what we're going to do. And the radio that we're going to create has three parts mainly. We're going to start with the radio, and then we will move on to the headphone. And just like the demo that we did, first we do the base mesh, we check the design, and we make sure that the design is actually non-destructive. And we're going to use a lot of booleans. And I really encourage you to have some prior knowledge before starting this one. Although this is a starting or a beginner's guide to game prop creation, it's not a beginner course to Blender. Although I'm trying my best to explain everything as much as possible, so that those beginner ones also can get benefit from this one. You will get a better understanding if you have prior knowledge to Blender, and especially the Boolean workflow, because the Boolean makes it really more interesting. For example, if I'm gonna carve something into this default cube, there are a couple of ways to go about it. For example, the first one is that I go into edit mode and do inset and then extrude it out. Okay, this is one way of doing it, but this one is destructive and it's gone. If you're gonna do some changes, you can go in here, try to bring that back. Let me bring it to here. If you're going to change it, if you're going to, for example, bevel, you can go here, but this one is destructive. And especially if you're a game designer, your team might require you to do some changes to the design. But Boolean design can enable you to do the designs especially so fast. And that is why I've chosen this one to be a Boolean piece. For example, now let's go bring the same cube again, and now let's go about doing the Boolean design. Let's say that we're going to do the same exact cut in here. So let me bring the wireframe, and now I shift D to duplicate this one and bring it up. And then let's rescale it to something like here. Now with the bool tool activated in here, if you have activated bool tool, you can go to edit preference and add-ons, and in here you can search for bool tool. It's a default Blender add-on, and I highly encourage you to check this display as wireframe. It's going to be a lot more helpful in creating your designs. Okay, now let's say that you're going to carve something into this cube. You just take this one, which is the Boolean piece, and then you're gonna click on the host piece that the Boolean is gonna be applied on, and then Control minus and done. Okay, now these are so identical, especially you see that They are very similar. But the thing with this one is that because we have used the Boolean and using the modifier stack using this Boolean piece, it's non-destructive and we can take it. And for example, the designer wants us to do some changes to this one. We so quickly take this one and bring it here and boom, a new design. And this one, a new design. If we wanted to, we can go here and try to, for example, take this one especially and apply the bevel modifier on that and especially a new design. So let's bring in the segments up. And then in order to remove this jaggediness in there, I'm gonna take this, shift and a space bar, go for smooth. Okay, now let's go for 30 degrees. And now on this one as well, a smooth for 30 degrees. Now it's gone. We have changed the design using the modifier stack. And because the Boolean is live, we can do any change that we want. For example, we can go in here and because we haven't applied modifier, we can change it on real time. For example, let me take this, isolate it. Now you see the default cube is in here. So now let me go in here, take this and bevel. And let's say that I'm going to extrude this one up. Okay, now let's go back to see what we have changed. Now you see we get completely new design for free. But using this workflow, it's very tedious. You need to bring this back to here, remove it, do a lot of cleanup, and so on. For example, to do something like this, you need to bring some cuts. For example, like this one. Now take this. Let me bring a cut in the middle as well. Now we go to polygon mode, delete this one as well. And now it's classic polygon modeling. We're going to try to create faces in here to get something like that. And now you see this is not actually as powerful as that one because it takes a lot of time and it's destructive. If we're gonna come back to change the design, we need to change a lot of things. So that's why I decided to go non-destructive in this tutorial. So now, and a non-destructive means that if I take this one and delete it, boom, we go back to the default cube. If we disable that one, you see now the default cube is in here without any problem. Okay, now we're gonna create this radio with 3 parts. This is actually the front part, this is the back part, and of course we have the middle part which is holding these together. And the middle part as well has some designs to it. You see some in the indentations in here, maybe some wires, we model them, and let's see which design we actually like. And the cool thing is that you can so fast change the design to your liking. Okay, now the first thing is setting the measures in here and setting the unit because the radio is relatively on a small prop. So it would be more precise if we work in centimeters, but the Blender default is in meters. For example, let me delete this default cube. If I bring in a mesh and drag that cube, you see that the size of the cube is 2 meters by 2 meters. So that would be so huge. So we need to rescale it and something like this. And let's apply the scale and rotation. And now let's say that we're gonna go to add some bevels. But in here, you see the bevel is 0.1 meters, which means that it's 10 centimeters. But we're working on a small prop. I really need to see the centimeters, not meters. So to fix that, we simply go in here and it should be here in scene properties, unit, and the unit system has been set to metric. And I really encourage you to work in metrics. And then in length, instead of meters, I'm going to set it to centimeters because we're working on a small prop and it will make sense to work in centimeters. And if I hit N to bring this one, you see now the prop is, the dimensions are 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters in 90 centimeters. But if I change this one to metric, to meters, you see now we get this value. So I'm happier to work in centimeters just for sake of consistency. Okay, now we did the unit setup as well. Let's delete the default cube and bring another default cube to start to work with. Okay, now let me take the light and the camera and delete them because we do not need them. Now we need to block out the design for this one. And since we have 3 pieces, this front piece, this middle piece, and this back piece, first we need to start with this middle piece that is holding everything together and actually guess out the actual dimensions, because this is an imaginary piece and we do not have actual dimensions for that. So I'm gonna go and rescale this and have this one as a guide. So now I'm gonna go in here, take the cube, and I'm going in edit mode, take this face and hit Alt and S, and just remember that these shortcuts that I do have been changed to the workflow. And if you or your workflow is different, there's no problem, but these shortcuts have been changed. If you do not know how these shortcuts have been set up, just go to introduction chapter. We have talked about the customization of the workflow and the shortcuts. Okay, now the dimensions are 2 meters by 2 meters, and that is way bigger than what we needed. So now I'm going to hit a scale and maybe scale it by 0.1. Now it's 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. And I believe that the height of the radio is cool, but let's go for something like 25 centimeters. Now for X and Y, let me see what that one is. This is the middle piece that we're blocking out. Let's go for something like 10. No, 10 is too much. 5. Okay, looks like 5 is an okay value. Now for X, we need to set it to 50. Okay, now I believe that this is something like it. Of course, we can change the design a little bit more. For example, I feel like the Y value is a bit too much. So now let's go for 4, because it has a front piece and back piece as well. So now let's set it to 3. Okay, this one is a good value. And for the height as well, we can go set it to 23, which is a good size. And I'm eyeballing in here to see how I'm actually liking the size. Okay, now it's so important when you rescale things or rotate things to apply the scale and rotation. So the shortcut for that is Control and A. And just remember that these are very important for modifiers and things like that. For example, if you go in here and add a bevel modifier, you see now the bevel isn't actually doing a good thing. It's not doing a good job because the scale has changed and this one doesn't know how to properly apply the bevel. And in here, if you assign the bevel, you see now it's not particularly doing the same thing, a good thing. And if we go in here as well, Control B, you see now it's not actually going to the center just like the way that we want it. So the way to fix that is hitting Control and A and applying the scale. Okay, now you see it has been properly boolean and everything has been centered. And in here you see that the scale has been set to 1 by 1 by 1. And it's very important to apply the scale and rotation when you change them, especially for working with modifiers. And let's say that we go change something about rotation as well. Now you see the rotation has been changed in Z. And if we're going to apply that for a modifier or something like that, we hit Control and A and then apply the rotation. You see now it has been zeroed out. So you want all of these to be, for a lot of times, for a lot of situations, to be defaulted out. Okay, now let me hit Control and A and apply scale. And we do not need to apply the rotation because we have not done any rotation on that. So now let me hit Shift and D to duplicate it. And I'm going to bring it to the front so that this one becomes the front face. And I'm especially talking about this one, which is going to be the main focus of this radio. Now, this one, of course, is too much. And now to have a better scaling on this one, I'm going to hit Control and F to isolate that and using the setup that we did. Now I'm going in here and taking this face and hit Alt and S to bring the pivot in here. And that is because if we go in here and I'm going to apply this scale, if I scale it in Y, it's going to be scaled based on that face that we did. But the previous setup was in the center. If I'm going to apply the scaling on this one, you see it becomes scaled on the center and we need to push that back. So another way to save a bit of time is taking this face, applying the rotation, the pivot on this one, and now rotating or scaling in here to get the proportions that you want. So I'm gonna snap it exactly to this vertex. So let me drag it back. And I'm going to apply the snapping by hitting Shift and Tab to activate a snap. And the shortcut that we did for the snapping menu, I believe, was Control, Alt, and S. Okay, now I'm going to snap to vertex and let's set it to active. Okay, now I'm taking this one, and let's say that I'm going to apply that to this. Okay, now you see it's exactly stitching these two together to create a seamless transition. And if you just try to randomly move it, you're going to get something like this. But when you move with the gizmo and just a snap to something, it's going to snap it to that level especially. Okay, now the placement is good, and I feel like we can rescale it in Y by 1.5. Okay, this one is okay. I believe that the actual size is very good. So now let me apply the scale on that. And now we need to block out the back piece. Okay, now this one is gonna be a bit thinner than this one. So now I'm going to hit Shift D, okay, and disable the snapping mode, and I'm gonna rotate that by negative 180 degrees and drag it back in here. And let me apply the snapping again, and I'm going to snap it to here perfectly. So instead of 1.5 centimeters, I'm going to make it 1. No, looks like this is a bit too much. Okay, 0.75 is a good value. So we have blocked out the scales and everything. So now let me take this one, apply the rotation because we have added the rotation to it, and apply the scale as well. Okay, now the pivot is in here, the pivot of this one is in here, the pivot of this one in here. It doesn't change, or it doesn't matter actually, unless we're gonna do some dramatic changes. Okay, now let's start by applying the round shape that we have here. You see now this has a round shape, but this one is relatively flat. So now let's go bring this one, and of course I'm going to bring the reference image so that I can take a look at it. And now I want this one to be a bit rounder. So now I'm going to go in here, take this edge and this edge, and hit Control and B to do a bevel. And what you need to do is hitting C. You see that when I'm trying to go beyond the extent, you see now it really tries to destroy the geometry. But in order to prevent that from happening, you need to hit C to clamp that so that it doesn't go beyond the actual geometry. So now we need to add some more geometry to this. I'm using mouse wheel up to add some segments to this. Okay, now I believe 4 segments are going to be good for this one. And one thing is that when we are trying to clamp, a lot of times, or all of the times, something like this happens. You see now we have some overlapping vertices because when it tried to clamp, these vertices reached to the same place and it prevented the bevel from going too far. So something like this happens. In order to fix that, we go to vertex mode, hit A to select all of them, and M to bring in the merge menu. We hit by distance. Now you see 2 vertices got merged. But we can go too far on this one and make this one non-destructive as well. So that we can control it on real time everywhere, because now we have the bevel locked in and we cannot change it whatsoever. So now I'm going to go back, and let's go back. But we're going to do that using the bevel modifier. But this one, you see, it only applies on this one, and it applies the bevel on all of the geometry. But we do not want that. We want the first bevel to be applied only on this part. So one of the ways of doing that is limiting the geometry and to create vertex group and assign them to them. So a lot of the Blender add-ons have something called the vertex group. So for this one, I believe it should be in limit mode. The default one is set to angle. So every angle above 30 degrees will get beveled. But if I set this to 90 degrees, you see now nothing gets beveled because every edge in here is 90 degrees. But if I drag it back only a slight bit, all of them will get captured. Okay, now let's bring it back to 30. And in here, I'm going to go to vertex group. But in here, since we do not have any vertex group, everything by default is there. So now I'm going to go in here. Let's disable the bevel modifier for now. I'm going to take this edge and these 2 edges, and I'm going to go to object data properties, and in vertex group I'm going to create a new vertex group and assign. Okay, now if I select, deselect, you see that these 2 get calculated in there. So now let's go to modifier, and in here, vertex group, I'm going to go and select this one. Okay, now we need to activate this. And now you see only this portion has been calculated. And if I apply, for example, some more vertices, you see now only this one gets calculated, which is actually what we want. And let's go for 4. And we are seeing some jaggedness in here, and that is because we have not applied the smooth yet on these ones. Okay, 30 degrees. Let's go for this one as well. Smooth 30 degrees. Smooth 30 degrees. This is crucial for the workflow that we're going for. Okay, now this is the vertex group, and if I go invert that, you see now all of the edges except for these two get calculated. And now I'm going to add another bevel to make this one totally rounder. For example, you see this one is a bit rounder than the middle piece in here. So now let me go in here. And now we were talking about non-destructive workflow. You see that we have this one. If I go and try to change this, you see every time we can go and non-destructively try to change the bevel to our liking. Okay, now this is about the non-destructive workflow. You can go and change everything every time to your liking. Okay, now after adding bevel, it would be a good idea to go in shading and applying the hardened normals. It will make the normals recalculate a lot better. So now after this one, I'm going to minimize this and go add a new bevel. And this bevel is going to be applied on all of the geometry. So again, we're going to go to shading, hardened normals, and let's apply 4 vertices. And let's make it a bit, okay, like something like this. And now you see that this one is totally non-destructive, and we can go and try to change it to our liking whenever we want to. And now if the shading is off a bit in here, you shouldn't really care about it, because this is not a Blender aimed course. This is for producing a prop and bringing that to a game engine. So a lot of these issues later on will be fixed in ZBrush and using the sculpting. And it's not going to be a problem. But if you really want to take this one out, you can go to add modifier and add a weighted normal to fix a lot of these issues. And now let's make it something like this. Okay, now done. The front part has been blocked out, and we can go and try to do the same thing for this one. We can now bring in a bevel modifier. And on this one, I'm going to add only one bevel. And let's see how many segments we added in here. Let's expand the bevel. We have 4 in here, and let's go in here and set it to 4 as well. It makes the consistency to be a lot better. So now let's go to shading, hardened normals, and we can add a weighted normals as well. It will do the same thing. Or let's clear this one out for now. And this is the backside that we can go for. But I feel like this is looking just too plasticky. And we can go try to bring the actual amount down to something like this. Okay, now this is a lot better and holding out so well. So now let's go for this one. And I believe that according to the references, let me bring up the main reference. You see now this one has a round shape as well. It rounds up in here, and on this one as well, it rounds up. But it's gonna be sharper than these ones. And I'm not gonna do a lot of intense beveling on this one. Okay, now let's go add a bevel, and I'm going to bring the bevel down so much. Okay, something like this. And I feel like it's okay. So now let's add 4 segments. But instead of adding the bevel on all of it, let's go again and bring the vertex group or bring the weight. This is another way to add it. And in order to do that, let's isolate it. I'm going to go in here because I'm going to only round these ones and not the front and back part. Okay, now let's take these. And if you hit N in the transform menu, you see now we have an option which is called the mean bevel weight. If we try to increase this one up, you see now these get marked for the bevel. And the reason that nothing has applied yet is because we need to apply the bevel. Okay, now you see it applies the bevel on these parts and not on the front and back part. Okay, now let's go back and try to see that. Now I'm happy with this one. Now let's go and apply a general bevel on it to highlight some edges. Okay, now I'm going to drag this one back. This is too much. I'm only wanting a very, very slight bit of bevel. And now let's go for 0.1. Okay, 0.1 is a good value. And now let's add 4 segments to it. No, 4 segments is too much. Let's add only 1 bevel. And let's go to shading, harden normals. No, harden normals isn't good for that, but it's good for this one because I want this one to be a bit stronger than that. Now, another thing that I'm actually noticed is that I do not like this one to be beveled. I do not want this top and bottom edge to be calculated. So now in here, let's go in the vertex group, try to remove it. Now you see we do not have a vertex group in here. It has contained everything on that. So let's remove, and in here, let's go for weight. Now I'm going to select only this one and this one for the first bevel. Let's try to deactivate this bevel so that we are seeing only that bevel. And this is a shading issue, no problem. We can go for mean bevel weight and try to increase it a bit. Now, if I try to take a look at the geometry without actually having these ones. So let me take this one and this one. Excuse me, I was manipulating the vertex data. We need to manipulate this edge data. Okay, now you see, this is actually what I wanted from that. I only wanted this side edges to be calculated and not the front ones. Not the top and bottom ones, excuse me. So now I'm taking this. Let's extend that a bit to something like this. Okay, now we have this round shape in here and flat shape on this side. Okay, now let's apply another bevel. And that is not working because of the clamp that this one has. So in geometry, it has a clamp overlap. If we enable that, you see, it tells us where the problem is. And that is because this bevel is too close. Let me bring that back. Okay, now you see this bevel as well gets calculated. Because let's take a look at this geometry in here. You see now, this is what happens. If I try to bring it closer, you see now we get 2 vertices so close to each other. And something like this, they totally are overlapping. And this prevents the next bevel from kicking in because it has an overlap. You see, this overlap tries to prevent from that because these 2 vertices are so close to each other that cause some issues. So we need to weld these vertices. But if we go in, you see now no vertices exist in here because these are all fake geometry. We have not applied these yet. So one way to fix that is by going in here and bringing a weld modifier. And I'm going to bring the weld modifier before this bevel modifier. Okay, now you see, because this weld modifier tries to weld some vertices that are overlapping, although we have the clamp overlap in here, because these vertices have been welded, this bevel as well kicks in. I hope it makes some sense, but it's the way that this workflow is gonna work. And let me show you with some statistics in here. I'm gonna go in this menu and bring the statistics up. So now in here, you see that we have 22 vertices, but if I try to disable that, you see now we get 24 vertices, and that is because these 2 middle vertices are overlapping, and the overlapping geometry prevents the bevel from happening because it tries to do the bevel, and that one tries to cause some issues because these 2 vertices needs to cross each other really, and it tries to bring some issues. So we can go and bring in a bevel weld modifier, try to weld these vertices so that it goes on. Okay, now I don't want this one to be so soft. Let's go for the second bevel. Let's go in here and only a small bit. 0.05 maybe a good value. Okay, now I'm going to go to this mode and try to take a look at it. And actually, I'm happy with how this is going. But this one is a bit too soft, I believe. So let's bring this one. And I feel like the bevel on this one needs to be changed. I'm going for the overall bevel, not the bevel that we assigned only for these edge rings that we have here. Okay, now let's set the amount to 0.5 as well. Okay, now this is the look that I'm going for. Now the blockout has been done. These are the shapes that we have. Of course, later on we will go for the headphone piece as well. But for now, we're only caring about creating the base mesh for the radio. And I feel like it's enough for this lesson. In the next one, we will go and try to add details to the front part and then moving to the middle and back parts as well. Okay, see you in the next one.